What's up, guys? Alex Khan here. Check out my new hoodie, Dude Kaboom, one of my favorite Disney characters. And I never get to wear it in public because I live in Florida. It's too hot to wear a hoodie, so I'm going to wear it in this vlog. And today, for my vlog, my Disney vlog, I'm going to do a movie review. And this one's going to be for Song of the South, very highly controversial movie from 1946. And I'm actually going to do a lot more movie reviews for Disney movies that I hadn't seen yet, because until last night, I hadn't seen Song of the South. And there's still a few other Disney movies that I would like to see and I hadn't seen yet, and that would be Tomorrowland, the live-action Dumbo, Onward, Witch Mountain. There's quite a few Disney movies that I haven't seen yet. But, so today's topic, Song of the South from 1946. And a very highly controversial movie, which I'm going to try to tread carefully here, because I know people will be offended on both sides of the spectrum. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm probably going to offend both sides, because when it comes to my line of thinking, I tried to pick a more balanced approach. I'm not one extreme or the other. I'm kind of in the middle, I suppose. So by that context, you're going to see that I'm probably going to offend even more people instead of just one group. So, Song of the South. In a nutshell, this is a live-action Disney movie, but in between the live-action scenes, there are animated sequences, like cartoons, basically. And what this movie is about, and this will help you explain why there's animated sequences, is there's this boy named Johnny. He's traveling to somewhere in Georgia with his parents. His parents are not getting along, apparently, because the mom wants to live and the dad wants to move to Atlanta where he can work. So Johnny's really depressed by his parents not being together. He takes solace with this African-American figure named Uncle Remus, and he finds happiness in the stories that Uncle Remus tells him. Uncle Remus tells him stories about the Brer Rabbit and how he's able to get out of sticky situations. And the reason why Uncle Remus is telling him these stories, not only just to make him happy, but also because Johnny is running into all kinds of problems, and Uncle Remus thinks these stories will help Johnny learn a lesson and overcome these problems. Later on, this will lead to some conflict with Johnny's mom, who thinks Uncle Remus's stories might be a bad influence in Johnny's decision-making. So that's why there's animated sequences, because whenever Uncle Remus tells a story, it's told in cartoon form. I'm going to tell you my thoughts on the movie, and then I want to talk about the controversies about this movie. But let's give you my thoughts first. I'm a person who has seen movies since the time of German silent movies. I've seen movies from every decade, so I know what a movie's like from each time period, and I know some of the controversies that come with some of these movies because of the time that they were made in. So this movie, for example, Song of the South, there is a lot of stereotyping of races, white and black, but that is truly a product of their time, because a lot of the other movies of this time also stereotype white and black. It's just the way movies were made back then. So that said, I want to talk about this movie from my perspective, and then I want to talk about the controversies that people raised with this movie. So if I were to grade this movie objectively speaking, I would give this movie a B+. It's Disney nostalgia. The music is top notch. Like Zippity Doo-Dah is an iconic song that is a staple of Disney movies even today. My particular favorite song is How Do You Do? Now, that song sounds really innocent, but the scene that it's in is one of the most controversial scenes, and I need to talk about that in just a moment. But the story itself is really awesome. It shows black and white people, holding hands. It shows them trying to get along, and it has dark moments, kind of like a lot of other Disney movies, like Up. In the first few minutes, you see the guy's wife pass away. Sorry for the spoiler. It's just in a lot of Disney movies, there are bits of darkness mixed in with lots of happiness. And that's what Song of the South is to me. It's a very typical Disney movie. I do love Uncle Remus's character. In fact, I believe the actor, James Baskett, was up for winning some kind of award for his performance in this movie. But on a sad note, for the premiere of this movie, he wasn't even allowed to watch in the theater because of segregation. You know, this black guy wasn't allowed in this white theater. But I want to talk about some of the controversies about this movie. Every person who watches a movie, they're always going to form a different opinion. Movies are an art form, and depending on the eye of the beholder, the art will be interpreted differently by that particular person. When I watched this movie, I wasn't really offended. I grew up with a lot of movies from different time periods, so the things that I saw in this movie I was already used to. But some people who watch this movie are not used to that, and they have a different sense of modern sensibilities, so they could get offended by stuff like this. The two biggest controversies talked about, one is the depiction of African Americans living on a plantation. So when people first saw this movie, they didn't know what the time period was. So they were confused when they saw African Americans really happy on this plantation, singing all these songs of joy. Basically, people thought that they were trying to justify slavery in the South. That's what they thought. But if you had to actually watch this movie does not take place during the Civil War. It takes place after the Civil War, and I think that's pretty clear if you watch the movie, because in the movie, you see black people ordering white people around. You see black people talking down to some white people. You also see this little white boy, Johnny, treating Uncle Remus like better than his father. And he's finding all of his life lessons from this black guy named Uncle Remus. And throughout the movie, you see him holding hands with Uncle Remus. You see a lot of black and whites mixing together. At least that's what I gathered from my viewing. So the other big controversy was, this will go back to that song that I like, How Do You Do? In that song, what's happening is Brer Fox is trying to capture the Brer Rabbit. So he makes this trap, and he calls it the Tar Baby. Basically what the Tar Baby is, in the movie, it's literally a little baby made of tar, and it's made to entrap the Brer Rabbit. So when Brer Rabbit is singing a song, How Do You Do? He hops on past the Tar Baby. He says, How do you do? The baby doesn't respond. So he comes back and says, How do you do again? The Tar Baby still doesn't respond. So what does the Brer Rabbit do? He punches the Tar Baby repeatedly. Every time he punches it, he gets even more stuck and ensnared in the Tar Baby. There are two definitions for Tar Baby. When Tar Baby was first originated as a term, it only meant a sticky situation that got worse if you put your hands in it even more. That was the original definition, and that was in the 1800s. But modern times, I don't know how modern this happened, but at some point, people started getting offended by the term Tar Baby because they basically equated the term Tar Baby with a derogatory insult towards people of darker skin tones. So I don't know when that happened, but it did happen. And I can appreciate that fact. You know, I'm a person of color, and I know there's a lot of terms that started off really innocently, but over time, they got a lot more derogatory. So going by that context, I can't defend that scene involving the Tar Baby. I'll just have to say that it is definitely a product of its time. Because, again, when this Tar Baby term was first originated, it had nothing to do with a racial insult. It was literally about a situation where you would get even more stuck if you put your hands in it. So a lot of politicians would use the term Tar Baby, not knowing that in today's modern sensibilities, it was a more offensive term that they were using. And that's why a lot of politicians took a lot of flack from using tar babies in their speeches. So I can defend the time period because I definitely don't see anything wrong with the time period. It's definitely after the Civil War. I am a person of color. I'm not offended by this movie, but you can't use me as a representative of all peoples of color, because some peoples of color might not be offended either, but I know a lot of people who will be offended by it. So that's where you have to tread lightly. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of stereotypes in this movie. It also stereotypes white people, because the general stereotype of white people in this movie in the South is that the Southerners are poor, they're barefooted, and they're ignorant. That's the stereotype that Song of the South used for Southerners. And then for blacks, you know, it made them really happy in their current situation, which might not be too ideal by other standards. And it made them, really happy-go-lucky, seemingly taking orders from white people. But honestly, if you look at the movie closely, the black people are giving orders too in this movie. This brings me to a new topic altogether. And the topic is, should Disney keep banning this movie from a general public release? This movie hasn't been sold to the public since, the 80s, when they had it on VHS. Nowadays, people are getting their copies from Japan. I got my copy on bootleg from eBay from some dude in America, and there were a lot of Japanese writings on the menu, so this probably came from the Japanese copy, I suppose. I'm not really sure, though. Here's a problem that Disney created by not releasing this movie. You have people on the left and people on the right who do not know what this movie is. They only hear what other people are saying. When they hear what the other people are saying, they are coming to really extreme views of this movie. I'll say, generally speaking, one side will hear about this movie and say that there's no racism altogether in this movie. And then people on the other side will look at this movie and say this movie is downright racist. I think there's a balance to be had in between both of those different extreme points of views. I don't think this movie was made to be racist, but I think in today's modern sensibilities, it's become pretty insulting to some people. I'll say that. By not releasing this, I think Disney is doing a huge disservice to the public. People need to see this movie. I think everyone should be entitled to watch this movie and come to their own conclusions. But if you don't let people see it, then people aren't going to know what they're saying. Again, everyone's going to view this movie differently. I'm not going to talk about the source material for which Song of the South is based on, because every Disney movie, or a lot of Disney movies, have source material that's really, really dark. Not just this movie, but also The Little Mermaid. Did you guys know Little Mermaid was written by Hans Christian Andersen? And actually, in the original story of The Little Mermaid, this Little Mermaid was going to kill herself at the end of the story, because the guy that she likes had a new wife, and she just couldn't take it. And a lot of these Disney fairy tales are based on Grimm fairy tales, which are extremely dark. So I think it's best, when you're grading this movie, not to talk about the books that they're based on, because the books are completely different than the movies that were made from them. I just didn't find this movie to be particularly offensive to me. But again, I don't speak for everybody. Some people are offended by this, and that should be respected. I'm trying to think. I think that's everything I want to talk about in this movie. If I were to grade this movie objectively, again, I would give this a B+. I think it's a really well-made movie for its time period. I like that slow pace. I like the mixture of animated and live action features. I love all the music. I think James Baskett was awesome. And also, I didn't mention this, there is a young Bobby Driscoll in this movie who plays Johnny. If you don't know who Johnny Driscoll is, he went on later to play Peter Pan's voice in the Disney animated movie. Excuse me. And there is a little scene in the movie where he's wearing this green outfit, and I instantly thought of Peter Pan when I saw that. I thought it was pretty funny. But yeah, I definitely recommend trying to get a copy of this movie. It's pretty expensive, though, because people are selling this on bootleg, and they know the only way to get this is on bootleg, so they jack the prices up. So again, Disney is doing everyone a disservice by not releasing this to the public. Everyone needs to see this movie. If Disney needs to, they can always put a disclaimer out. But again, I think people should come to their own conclusions of what this movie is, instead of making this movie this big mystery movie, and people aren't making well-educated conclusions about this movie. Shoot, just let people see the movie and people will be better informed. I want to hear your thoughts on this movie. And when you're giving your thoughts, just know that everyone is different. Some people might agree with you, some people might not agree with you. That's just the way movies are. It's just people always have different taste in movies.